Cooking is essential in our daily life, but have you ever thought of how to cook faster? To answer the question, we need to know where does the heat comes from and how does the food get heated. The heat is the form of energy that is transferred between systems or objects with different temperature, which is usually measured in calories, joules, and BTU. The heat flows from the high temperature system to the low temperature system. As objects warm up or cool down, their kinetic energy changes. We can measure the average kinetic energy of the particles by using temperature. The larger the temperature difference is, the larger the heat difference is. For example, your hand will be very cold when you are touching an ice cube. Back to cooking. Most of the heat is generated through burning LPG and town gas in Hong Kong. Take LPG as an example. The heat is initially stored as a chemical energy in C3H8. Under complete combustion of C3H8 with sufficient supply of oxygen, a large amount of heat could be generated and we could eventually turn on the stoves and cook for our own food. The equation is shown here. And some of you might be curious, then what does it relate to my cooking speed? And that is a really good question. In real-life situation, incomplete combustion usually occurs. Incomplete combustion occurs when the supply of air or oxygen is insufficient during heating. Water is still produced, but carbon monoxide and sometimes even carbon will be also produced with carbon dioxide. As a result, large amounts of smoke and less energy is produced. It will greatly affect the heat generation and hence reduce the cooking speed. And the equation of incomplete combustion is shown here. Unfortunately, it can be prevented. As long as we open our windows and let the indoor air flow outside, it might increase the oxygen supply in combustion. So, remember to open the windows and the door before you start your cooking. Some of you might also be curious, how can we speed up the heat transfer rate? To understand the concept, we need to find out the ways of heat transfer first. In fact, there are mainly three ways: conduction, convection, and radiation. Today, we will talk about conduction and convection mainly. Conduction is direct contact. The heat will be transmitted through direct contact to heat source. For example, when we boil the water in a pan, the heat from the stove will directly heat up the pan, so it makes the pan itself a heating source too. After that, the pan becomes a heating source, and it will boil the water to the boiling point. At the same time, if the grip is also made of metal, then it will be heated to a very high temperature too. So remember to buy a copper or aluminum pan which are good thermal conductors, and make sure the grip of the pan is not made of metal. You don't want to cook your hand at the same time, right? And for convection, it is the transfer of heat through current or circulation of heat. For example, take water in the pan as an example again. There are warm water molecules and cold water molecules at the same time. Just like once you add some cold water into a cup of hot water, there will be hot liquid and cold water in the cup at the same time. Back to convection, the warm water molecules will be kept circulated throughout the water due to temperature difference. As a result, the very hot water molecules from the bottom of the pan are heated and then rise to the top to bump and transfer the heat energy into other cold water molecules on the surface. And remember, when talking about convection, usually we will count conduction effect is also included in convection, as both concepts are very similar. In conclusion, today we talked about where does the heat comes from and how does the heat transfer to the pan. Complete combustion generates the heat through LPG and town gas, and the heat transfer through conduction and convection. If you really want to cook faster, simply make use of the knowledge you have learned today. Open the door and the windows and let the fresh air and oxygen flows in and flows out. So boys and girls, remember to cook for your parents starting from today.